Well, today is a very special day in Penguins history, isn't it? Happy June 12th day to all Penguins fans out there. To start today's show, we're going to get into why the Penguins do have assets to give up when it comes to a big trade or two this offseason. That's coming up right after this.
You're Locked On Penguins, your daily podcast on the Pittsburgh Penguins, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Locked On Penguins podcast. I am your host, Hunter Hodes. Remember to follow me on Twitter at Hunter Hodes. Follow the show's Twitter at Orso Penguins. Of course, thank you all so much for making this your first listen today. We are free and available on all platforms. Again, happy June 12th to all who celebrate. Happy Monday to everyone else out there that is listening to the show. And, maybe there are non-Penguins fans that do partake in listening/watching this show. But to start off today's episode, we're going to get into something that I've really seen discussed a lot, throughout just the Penguins Twitter sphere and just everywhere else where I consume Penguins content. It's the topic about, do the Penguins have enough assets to partake in some big trades? Obviously they have the cap space, $20 million. It can go up to about $25 million if they buy out Mikael Granlund, or if they trade him and somehow get him off the books, whether you attach the 14th overall pick, maybe to Chicago for the 19th overall pick, that would make some sense. But they are in very good space when it comes to the cap. But of course, you have to spend that space wisely, because you don't want to do what Ron Hextall and Jim Rutherford did at times before Kyle Dubas came in, where they would open up cap space, but they would just barf it all away and bring in players who are not that good. Heck, remember, when Jim Rutherford was here, traded Matt Hungwick, Connor Sherry, opened up all that cap space on Jack Johnson. This past year, gets Brock McGinn out of here, puts him on waivers, sends him the Ducks. You open up that cap space. Kasperi Kapanen goes on waivers, all that to bring in Mikael Granlund. So you have to use it wisely. But when it comes to assets with big deals, I personally am of the opinion that the Penguins, they do have the assets needed to bring in a good player. Now, do they have the assets that other teams have? No. Like, for example, I saw a report on Sunday that the Kings might be floating the tires on getting Tom Wilson. Honestly, the Penguins would never get Tom Wilson from the Capitals because those two teams are not going to trade with each other. But the Kings, they have a very deep prospect pool. They have a lot of picks. They have good young players. That kind of trade would make sense for both parties, especially if the Capitals maybe want to do a little bit of a retool and the Kings are going for it. And also, again, they have a lot of assets. But the Penguins, even though they don't have the prospects, they have an Owen Pickering who I think could entice some general managers. They do have a boatload of picks. They have their first rounders, second rounders. Obviously they gave away next year's one, but I believe they have this year's one. They have most of their third rounders going forward, fourth, fifth. So they have mostly a full quartet of picks to choose from when it comes to trades. And we've seen players only go 4 picks. Heck, this past year, remember, Jacob Chychrun, that was reported by Rob Rossi and Josh O, the Athletic, that Mike Sullivan really wanted him. And he goes to the Ottawa Senators for 3 draft picks. There no prospects, no players, 3 draft picks. And the Penguins could have fit him in. That's the thing. They had enough salary cap space to bring him in, or Ron Hextall didn't want to do that, yet he wanted to bring in Mikael Granlund for a second-round pick. I promise I'm going to be done talking about that very soon, but just for the basis of this discussion, I had to bring it in. And only 3 picks. That was it, and he's a bona fide, at least second pairing, and you can easily argue that he is a top pairing defenseman in this league. I would say he's a top pairing defenseman for most teams in this league. So a player like that went for something very, very low. Heck, when you shift gears a little bit to the goaltending market, for example, remember last year when the Minnesota Wild got Filip Gustavsson from the Ottawa Senators? All they had to give up was Cam Talbot. Cam Talbot did nothing for the Senators this year. Meanwhile, Gustavsson, he went on to have a great year for the Wild, finished with a save percentage of over 915. I believe it's actually over 920. And he's set up to be the Wild's number one goalie heading into next season, no matter what happens with Marc-Andre Fleury. They got a number one goalie for basically nothing. You want to go back even further. So Darcy Kuemper, when the Avalanche won the Stanley Cup, the Avalanche got him from Arizona for Connor Timmins and a first-round pick in last year's draft. Still, I don't even think that's super expensive. A first-round pick, Penguins have those. Connor Timmins, decent defensive prospect, but Avalanche got a cup out of it, so it was worth it. And he's still, I think he's at least a pretty decent goalie. You go back even further than that when the Avalanche got Phillip Grubauer from the Washington Capitals. All they had to give up was a second-round pick in the 2018 NHL draft. Like these prices are not that much. Usually when you see prices floated out there, when it comes to a trade, you can take those with a little bit of a grain of salt because 90% of the time, those prices drop and that the player goes for a fraction of what the team originally asked for. That's what happens at every single trade deadline. Prices come down. Heck, we're coming into the draft in the next couple of weeks. Prices are sky high right now for someone like Scott Lawton. I think I saw a report that the Flyers declined a first-round pick for him. They're probably asking for a lot more. That's going to go down, I think, as the draft gets closer. I know they don't have to trade him because he still has another year left, I believe, on his contract, but that's how it goes, people. So the Penguins, they do have the assets needed to go out and acquire a starting goalie, a top defenseman, and all that stuff. They can even, see if anyone wants some parts off the roster. Maybe a GM does like a bottom-pairing defenseman like Jan Rutta. Maybe a GM wants a player like Brian Rush. They can see that he will bounce back for next season. Yes, he has a 15 no trade clause where he can block trades to up to 15 teams in the league. And yes, he had a little bit of a down year this past year, but if you look at his shooting percentage and look at his numbers, I think that's bound to go up next season. So maybe a GM could take a chance on him. Could a team take a chance on Jeff Petrie? Maybe he could rebound even though he's in his mid-30s. That one's maybe a little less likely. But again, my overall point is that the Penguins do have the assets needed to go out and acquire a top goalie. I think they can definitely make a trade for Hellebuck if they wanted to. Saros as well. Vemelka, I definitely think they could. Gibson would be also easy, but again, I'm not really interested in him. The only way you could even convince me to go out and get Gibson is if you're giving up 2 mid-round picks and maybe Casey DeSmith. And I don't usually mind the team trading top picks prospect. I wouldn't do it for someone like Gibson who has 4 more years and have $6.4 million per year. That's just a hard pass for me. Again, the only way I would do that is if you're giving up 2 mid-round picks and maybe Casey DeSmith, and then you have to go out and get a backup for Gibson or something like that. And I would also have the Ducks maybe eat some salary on that deal. And that's the only way. But Penguins, they have a lot of picks. I know they at least have Owen Pickering. If you can somehow convince a team or two to take people from Wilkes-Barre, that's probably going to be the one where you can't convince because, Sam Poulin's down there. Okay. Valtteri Puustinen. Okay. Outside of those two, got Nathan Legare. Okay. But it's not much to write home about. But in terms of goalie trades, especially, a lot of times you're just going to be giving up draft picks. And the Penguins have those. So they will have the assets to swing and potentially swing big if they want to. And I will say for a top 4 defenseman as well. So I still think Kyle's going to be very active in the trade market these next couple of weeks leading up to the draft. Free agency is in a little less than 3 weeks. That's going to be a lot of fun as well. There's no shortage of rumors that are going to come out in the next few weeks regarding this team and potential moves. I'll have it all here for you on the Locked On Penguins podcast, and I'll also have more targets that I would like to see the Penguins potentially go after as well. But in terms of trades, I think the Penguins can definitely make some big acquisitions, even though they don't have the prospect pool that some of these other teams do. So that does it for this first segment of the Locked On Penguins podcast. Coming up after this, we're going to continue our season reviews. I had them paused for a little bit because of all the GM stuff, Kyle Dubas, and just all the free agency and trade stuff, but we're getting back to them. We're doing some of the extras now before we get to the coaching staff. Today's turn is Chad Ruhwedel's. But before we get into that, we do have to discuss athletic greens. And I use them every single day. And I started taking them because I didn't really have time in the morning to work out. I get up usually right before my alarm for work. And when I say right before, I mean like 8:45 for like a 9 a.m. shift. That is how I've always rolled. I also wanted better gut health. I wanted a better immune system. I don't really like taking pills and vitamins. I did as a kid. I don't really like doing that anymore. So you're probably wondering, what is this stuff? Well, with one delicious scoop of athletic greens, you're resorting 75 high-quality vitamins, minerals, whole food source superfoods, and probiotics to help you start your day right. This special blend of ingredients supports your gut health, your nervous system, your immune system, your energy recovery, focus, and aging, all of those things. It's lifestyle-friendly, whether you eat keto, vegan, dairy-free, or gluten-free. Also costs you less than $3 a day. You're investing in your health, and it's cheaper than your cold brew habit. They also have over 7,000 5-star reviews and is recommended by numerous professional athletes. Right now, it's time to reclaim your health and arm your immune system with convenient daily nutrition. It's just one scoop in a cup of water every day, and that's it. There's no need for a million different pills and supplements to look out for your health. And to make it easy, they're going to give you a free 1-year supply of immune-supporting vitamin D and 5 free child packs with your first purchase. All you have to do is visit athleticgreens.com/NHL Network. That is, again, athleticgreens.com/NHL Network to take ownership over your health and pick up the ultimate daily nutritional insurance. All right, we're back in this episode of the Locked On Penguins podcast. I'm your host, Hunter Hodes. Remember to follow me on Twitter at Hunter Hodes. Follow the show's Twitter at Locked On Penguins. And of course, thank you all so much for making this your first listen of the day. We are free and available on all platforms. So, continuing our season reviews as we get into the extras, is defenseman Chad Ruhwedel. Played 47 games for the Penguins this season, so a little over half the season. Underlying numbers were okay. I'm going to get to that in just a second. But I did notice a little bit of a dip in his play, just based off my eye test. I didn't like late in the season when he was taking a lot of penalties in late stages of the games. He was killing them in those situations. The biggest one that I can remember, of course, was that game against the Ottawa Senators. And the Penguins had tied it with less than 5 minutes to go. It looks like they're going to get a point out of that game and potentially win it in overtime because they're outplaying the Senators. But Ruhwedel takes the penalty with 3 minutes left in the third period, and the Penguins penalty kill, which had been very inconsistent and honestly not that good in the second half of the season, gave up a goal with 2 minutes left, and they lost in regulation. And Ruhwedel there was really no reason to take that penalty, but he did anyway. And honestly, there were other games. Well, I believe the game against the St. Louis Blues that was nationally televised, he took a bad penalty. The game against the Dallas Stars, he took a bad penalty. That was in the third period when the Penguins took 2 to 3 penalties in a row when that game was tied. And the Stars were able to, go up 3-1 before the Penguins made it interesting in the end. They lost that game 3-2. But too many instances late in the season where Ruhwedel was just playing not really good defensively and just bad situational hockey. I think that's what I'm really looking for with that. It was a complete 180 from what I saw a year ago when he played in almost 80 games and looked like he was going to, have this job for the next season before, Ron Hextall went out and acquired both Jeff Petrie and Jan Rutta. But this past season, eye test-wise, not fully good. Now, getting into the stats, when he was on the ice, played almost 600 minutes at 5-on-5. The Penguins had 52.7% of the shot attempts in terms of goals for, goals against, 21 goals for, 26 goals against. That lines up, honestly, with the eye test. He was on the ice for a little too many goals when he was in there, especially, and that's weird that he would be below 500 on the bottom pairing, but that just goes to show that the bottom pairing when Rutta was out, whether it was P.O. Joseph on his left side or Mark Friedman, it was not good enough. Expected goal share, not bad, 54%. 53% of the scoring chances for the Penguins when he was on the ice, 53% of the high danger chances, but 11 high danger goals for, 15 high danger goals against. So didn't really do that good of a job clearing out the net front. And again, also had some not that good situational hockey. 1 goal, 5 points in the 47 games this season. So yeah, a little bit of a mixed bag. You have some good underlying numbers in terms of scoring chances, high danger chances, shot attempts, but in terms of actual goals for, goals against, and high danger goals for, goals against, he dipped below 500 when it comes to that. I do think he's going to be on this team next season. I don't think Kyle is going to move on from him. If they do decide to move on from Jan Rutta, I'm kind of leaning toward the fact that they should give him another chance at the gig full time. I think part of the reason why you saw him play poorly last season was because he got put right back into the role that he had prior to last season, where he was just an extra. Because remember, last year, Cody Ceci left, signed with the Edmonton Oilers. Ruhwedel was seen as his replacement, and he was good for the Penguins that season in the 78 games. You look at it, just his counting stats: 4 goals, 13 points. Both those numbers were career highs. His 5 points this past season were the lowest they've been since 2021, when he only played in 17 games. But in terms of, half a season, it's the lowest it's been since, basically when the pandemic started. And I know he's never been known to be like this offensive presence, offensively. He's always been known for his defensive work. But so what he did last season, I thought, was pretty solid. But you get forced back into the role because Hextall decided to sign Jan Rutta to a contract that he probably didn't need to. And you go back to doing what you were before. And yeah, I think that's going to kill your confidence a little bit. And if they do decide to move on from Rutta, whether it's in a trade for, another defenseman come back, or just a salary dump, I think Ruhwedel can go in there and get back to the level that we saw from him. Obviously not this past season, but the season before. I've always liked him in that number 7, number 8 role. I remember I've had Josh Yohe on, and he's told me that Jacques Martin, when he was here, spoke very highly of Ruhwedel, with how intelligent he was as a player, with how he was always making the right read. You could easily make an argument that he was one of the Penguins' better defensemen in 2021, 2022. This past season, obviously, it fell down a cliff a little bit, but I still like this player for the value that he provides on the contract that he has. He's pretty solid. And if you put him back into a full-time role for the money that he makes, I think he'll do a better job than he did this past season. I think this was an anomaly from him, and I think you will see him play a lot better if he gets the full-time minutes back. Obviously, you can also argue that they could use an upgrade over Ruhwedel if you move on from Rutta. I totally understand that. But based on the job that he did in 2022 for that last season, I think it warrants him getting another chance on that bottom pairing. You can switch out the defense however else you want, whether it's getting a new partner for Chris Letang, whether that's maybe moving on from Jeff Petrie and getting another player to play behind him for a bit cheaper, especially money-wise. You have Marcus Peters on the left side. You have P.O. Joseph. I still think if Ruhwedel is in your top 6 next season and you make other changes surrounding the defense, I still think it's a job well done by Kyle Dubas. So if I am him, I am still looking to move on from Rutta, because I don't really think he did that good of a job. Again, I think Ruhwedel can do exactly what Rutta does, except for just a bit cheaper. Again, I know it was a down year. Eye test-wise, I wasn't a fan of it. Numbers-wise, they were a bit mixed. But I think he's in line for a bounce back next season. And I do expect him to be on this team. My overall grade, I'm going to give him around a C-, a little below average. That's down a little bit from what I had from him in 2022. And I believe I gave him about a B+ for my season review grade. But, it's warranted when he didn't really play that well. And again, it also doesn't help when he's getting a lot of minutes with people he's not used to playing with, and also just going back into the role that he had for the prior seasons. But that wraps up Chad Ruhwedel's season in review. Let me know what you thought about Ruhwedel's season. Do you think he should be given more full-time minutes next season? Do you think Jan Rutta should be traded so that Ruhwedel should have those minutes? Or do you think they should bring in someone else other than one of those two to take those minutes on? Let me know down in the comments. You can also send me a DM on social media and all that. To wrap up the show, we're going to get into why June 12th is such a special day in Penguins history, and we're going to get into some stories from June 12th, 2016 and June 12th, 2009, at least from my perspective when it comes to that. But before we jump into that, we do have to discuss one of the newest sponsors of Locked On. Well, that's not the one I was looking at. I clicked the wrong one. I had the Tuesday one for tomorrow's show. But for today, we do have to discuss eBay Motors for a championship team. It's all about making sure every player is a perfect fit. It's the same when it comes to your vehicle. Every part needs to fit just right. So the next time you need parts and accessories, you can head to eBay Motors. With eBay Guaranteed Fit, you can be sure every part you need fits right the first time around. Just add your ride to My Garage and look for the green check to know the part will fit, or you'll get your money back. Because just like in sports, confidence is the name of the game where you shop on eBay Motors. And with over 122 million parts to choose from, you'll be back in the game in no time. After all, it's easy to bring home a win when the right parts are guaranteed. Get the right parts, the right fit, and the right prices on ebaymotors.com. That's right. eBay Guaranteed Fit, only available to U.S. customers. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. All right, we're back here on this episode of the Locked On Penguins podcast. I am your host, Hunter Hodes. Remember to follow me on Twitter at Hunter Hodes, follow the show's Twitter at Penguins. And of course, thank you all so much for making this your first listen / watch of the day. We are free and available on all platforms. June 12th, obviously a very special day in Penguins history. 2009, they won the Cup over the Detroit Red Wings. 2016, they beat the San Jose Sharks. 2009, I'll never forget those final few minutes. I was only 11 years old. Standing there with my heads on my head, just pacing around the room. Those final 3 minutes. If there's that video is on YouTube, by the way, of just the final 3 minutes of that game against the Red Wings, where the Penguins were getting hemmed in their own zone, just sky hooking it out, just praying to God that the Red Wings do not score there. What a save by Marc-Andre Fleury on Nicklas Lidstrom, obviously, but the one moment where I definitely had a heart attack and almost collapsed was when Nicholas Kronwall, he hit the crossbar with literally 3 minutes left. And I remember my mom and I were just standing right there, and we legit almost fainted because we saw the crowd reaction and we heard Doc's call, and we 1,000,000% thought that Nick Kronwall was going to send that game to overtime. So obviously the Penguins got super lucky that puck did not go in, but man, what a job by Marc-Andre Fleury to save that on Nicklas Lidstrom. I mean, Lidstrom was just awesome. I know he was a bit older at that point, but he's easily the greatest defenseman I've ever watched. And that game was just so awesome because no one gave the Penguins a chance to win it. You have Mario Lemieux's text message that was heard around the world after the Penguins won that cup. Max Talbot became the hero when no one expected him to. Chris Osgood gave up an absolute howler of a goal. You could probably say both the goals he gave up were howlers, especially the second one. That angle that he played on Talbot's second goal was so bad. Go and rewatch it and look how small he looks. Just a horrendous angle from him. But with how talented that Red Wings team was, it was a miracle that the Penguins won the cup that season. Just an amazing run. One of my favorites. But I will still say the 2016 one was my favorite one. The way the Penguins bulldozed everyone throughout that cup run. Once I saw them crush the Rangers in Game 5. Actually, no. That one was good. The way I saw them beat the Capitals in Game 6, I was like, okay, I think we got something special brewing here. Rangers one, I definitely had that feeling. But once they beat the Capitals, even though all the crazy shenanigans that happened in that game, I was like, okay, they're going to the conference final. They should be the favorite to win the cup here because that was just an absolute buzzsaw. I graduated high school 7 years ago today. For my ceremony, you were not allowed to have your phone. I saw people getting their phones confiscated, that people that took them in. So the game was happening as everyone's names were being read. And I'm just sitting there like, oh my God, can this just finish up already? I remember I walked down from the stage after I got my diploma, and I can see my grandpa in the crowd. He was there, and he mouths to me 1-0 Pittsburgh. And I did a huge fist bump, and everyone probably saw what I did. I didn't care. And I mouthed him. He scored, and he said 8. I'm like, okay, so it was Dumoulin. I obviously did not expect that. Obviously at the time, but we ended up racing home. We go outside, we take a few pictures. I get my phone back. I'm like, Mom, let's go. Like, I'm not dealing with this. Race home, and then that's when I saw one of the greatest periods of Penguins hockey that I have ever watched in my life. That third period, with the way the Penguins defended against the Sharks, they gave them nothing. Total shutdown, Penguins hockey from Mike Sullivan. The 1-2-2 was working beautifully. The Sharks, I believe, had one shot on goal in those 20 minutes. They didn't threaten at all. It was honestly a very professional performance throughout those 60 minutes by the Penguins. The Sharks, they had one goal, to tie it, and then Letang was able to make it 2-1, and the Penguins were able to win it 3-1 thanks to an empty net goal. But the way they defended, they weren't letting any of the Sharks get close to a good scoring chance. And obviously, you get so nervous because you're watching the minutes go down. It's like, oh my God, can you end the game at this rate? But as the minutes were ticking down, I was actually starting to get more and more confident, not more and more nervous, because they weren't hemmed in their own zone. They were on their heels. They were pushing the pace of the attack. And they actually made Martin Jones make a couple of ridiculous saves, one with 4 to 5 minutes left. Should have made it. That should have ended the game right there. But he was able to keep the minute before the Penguins were able to get that empty net goal late in the game to really ice it, to get their first cup since 2009. That was a professional period by the Penguins. And again, to this day, I think one of my favorite periods of hockey that I've ever watched for as long as I've been watching this team. And that capped off just an amazing run. Showed off why Mike Sullivan is a brilliant tactician. Showed off why that team was so special and they could play, honestly, any play style. Both those runs hold such a special place to my heart. The 2016 run holds a little more to me just because, I graduated high school on that night, but still the 2009 one was so much fun because no one thought they stood a chance winning it going into that game just because of the way Detroit was playing at home in that series. But the Penguins proved all of them wrong, and they were able to slay the dragon that was the Red Wings. And seeing Hossa just sitting there, his head in his hands, drinking them out the water, then just throwing it, nothing beat that. And I love Marian Hossa. I'll always say that on the show. He got his cups after, so it probably doesn't really mean much to him right now. But seeing that definitely warmed my heart a little bit. But two amazing runs. June 11th was yesterday. That was the anniversary of the 2017 Cup run where they beat Nashville in 6 games. A lot of special memories from all 3 of these runs. You all should be very blessed. The Penguins have gone on those runs, and I think you all should be feeling very spoiled. They've won 3 cups in the last 14 years. But overall, happy June 12th day to everyone out there who is listening / watching this podcast, and hope you all remember where you were when the Penguins won those 2 Stanley Cups on this day. I know I especially was, for me, when it comes to my graduation and when it comes to celebrating with my mom in 2009 when I was only 11 years old. But that'll do it for this one. Thank you all so much for listening / watching this episode. We'll be back with another episode for you all on Tuesday. We'll continue some of the season reviews. We'll get to Mark Friedman, and we'll also get to some more trade and free agency targets I think Kyle Dubas could be potentially looking at with all the salary cap space that the Penguins do have. So again, thank you all so much for tuning in. Very much appreciate it. I'll be back with another episode for you all on Tuesday.